Welcome, everyone. You're listening to the ImPerfect Podcast. I'm Kathy.
And I'm Kennedy. Join us on this week's episode as we discuss intriguing topics and people of interest that will inspire us to explore all of the unique pieces of ourselves.
We are all imperfectly perfect.
We're glad you're here.
Hello, and welcome back to our next episode of the ImPerfect Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about trends, and our sources are thisversusthat.org, BuzzFeed.com, and Vice.com. So, according to vocabulary.com, a trend is what's hip or popular at a certain point in time. In today's society, fashion trends are determined by many factors, one of which is trend forecasters. They're the people who predict the future of fashion through microtrends. And microtrends are items that go in and out of style rather quickly, usually from season to season. And then we have macro trends also that they predict. And macro trends are that which is more long-term and can sometimes last for years.
And then there's influencers. So these are people, and they tend to be people who are rich or famous or influential in some way. And they have a significant impact on the fashion industry by their influence on others. And something else to consider as well, that there's a lot of companies who can pay said influencers to promote their products. And if so-and-so is wearing it, everyone's going to want to be wearing it, right? So that's kind of how that works.
Yeah. Fashion also, or I guess we're talking particularly about fashion today, but trends in general are also dependent on other world factors like culture, politics, economics, and even technology.
And then there's consumers. So this is a little bit less influential, but it's the ability or desire to buy into something. So as a consumer. So yeah, and I even think about, I don't know if you're aware of this show, Mom, but there's one called Next in Fashion on Netflix. And it's basically a competition on how people compete to create these designs and fashion works and whatever. And it's big, elaborate things that you would never see anybody walk down the street in, but it's trying to predict what those fashion trends could potentially be. So it's big, elaborate. You have to think outside of the box things. Like I remember there was one puffer jacket that was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 meters long. And it was like a train, like as if anyone's going to wear a puffer jacket like that. But it's trying to get a wow factor, right, on this particular show.
Yeah, I see, I used to watch fashion television and you'd see these outlandish things, which at the time were outlandish, but now some of the things that they bring on the runway are like, what are you even, like, who wears this stuff? And one that comes immediately to mind, which I don't even know whose friend whose friend or which friend of mine posted it, but it was fashion trends for the fall and the winter, and it showed these people on the runway and they're bundled up like they've got scarves, like there must be 200 scarves on them, and that like they can barely, they're a mummy. And then there was this other person that had like pillows, they had cut pillows around their body so they just look like a snowman of pillows essentially. And I commented on whose ever page it was, I just said like, this is this is clothing for me in the winter because I'm always so cold, right? Either I'm too hot or too cold. But yeah, anyway, that's what comes to mind when you mention that show.
Yeah, similar kind of backgrounds, I feel. But yeah, so we've kind of divvied up different trends by girls, boys, and then just in general kind of trends. We have quite a list, so we'll just start working through some of them. Some of them are pretty comical, and we'll see where we get. So I'll start with snail skincare for girls. So yeah, snail slime essentially has turned into a big thing. So using snail mucin, which is a real word, I looked it up. It is what you think it is, and turning it into oils, serums, and slime facials. And some people even use the actual snail
Yeah, that's kind of gross, but we're
a
so
little.
influenced sometimes, eh? Like when I was looking up things for our show notes, when you look back and you see the bell bottoms of the 60s, like they were inspired by the US Navy uniforms. And what would inspire this other than just the whole facial thing? Like,
Skincare is a big thing right now. So I think you could tell anyone anything,
listen,
rub
sister,
urine on your face or something, and I'm sure people would go for it. I don't know.
yeah, your sister lives with me, so I'm fully aware of, she's mixing some potion in the kitchen. And I'm like, what are you doing? Something I saw on TikTok. So
Right, right.
I'll get that. But yeah. But
Yeah.
I mean, just think of the other things like that. I think I grew up in the 80s, right? So there was like the puffy shoulders, and we're not just talking like minimal shoulder pads, like they were square and yeah, villainous looking. And you'd pair that with a pair of leg warmers, and you had a great look going on for the 80s. And then when you look at even the 90s, some of the crazy trends, right? Like think about the snuffleupagus lashes that some girls had. And
That's not just the 90s anymore. I feel like it's back again. So
really,
you can
yeah,
call it the 90s, but I've been seeing them. So it's just this like with the eyelashes all the time. Like, and then I've seen the funniest videos of women will be out in the winter weather or whatever, and the wind's just blowing and their eyelashes are just like they can't close their eyes because their eyelashes are just like blowing in the wind and
it's so
comical.
funny to think who sits back and thinks of this stuff, right? Like, here's another one that first appeared in 2021 and it stuck around and became a common thing now: nose blush.
It is very common, and I can actually speak on this. So it is kind of like it started in like the e-girl kind of area. So it's kind of just an alternative subculture that follows Japanese inspired trends. Um, and it creates that like kind of flustered or sick kind of look. But it is very popular right now in the same way that you use highlighter to, you know, lighten certain areas of your face to create that jawline or cheekbone. The same with contour, like it's kind of just an added, like, oh, I'm gonna dust a bit of pink on the end of my nose. And to my eyes, it looks actually okay if done properly, but that could just be because of my age group.
Yeah, I'm thinking of when you went to high school. And there was a trend there for a while of like the goal was to go to school looking like you just rolled out of bed, and your mascara, like girls were putting mascara and eyeliner like under their eyes and mixing it all in so you looked like you just got up and it was dripping down your face.
Well,
Yeah.
that's how it appeared to you, but to my eyes in high school, yes, it was like it looks like you fell asleep with your mascara on, but it wasn't looked at sideways necessarily because
Don't,
most girls were doing it.
yeah, don't get it at all.
But here's another thing, it's one of those situations that just came to be. I don't think girls were necessarily purposefully trying to make it look that way. It was just became socially accepted that it was okay. I don't
Well,
know.
I think it's come back around too, right? Because I read uh, in Korea in 2021 that it kind of what we're talking about
Mm.
was the thing, and it's still hanging around. So basically, you want to look like you have dark bags under your eyes and you haven't slept in weeks. Like, yay, I'm in style. It just,
Right.
I I can't for the life of me figure out why you'd want to make yourself look worse.
If it's a trend, I don't know what to tell you. There's also faux beauty marks and freckles. I actually know a couple people that do this. And it's so funny how freckles kind of they have a touch and go situation. Sometimes people want to have freckles and other times it's like cover them up. And it tends to always be the people that have freckles want to cover them up, and the ones that don't have them want to put faux ones on their face. So there's actually products that are sold. I'm not familiar with the brands or names necessarily, but I do know there's techniques. Like there's some girls that put the product on a toothbrush and then they flick it so it creates this like splash effect. And then you leave it for a couple minutes and you wash your face and it has that like faded freckle appearance. But to me, I notice when they're faux, like when they're not real, just because they're so strategically placed. Some people sit there and dot them specifically. I don't know.
And there's like DIY dimples now too, right?
Mm,
Where you use a marker and you contour and yeah.
you can do a lot with makeup, that's for sure. I've not seen the dimple one personally, but I'm sure, I mean, it's got to exist for sure.
Yeah. And not too long ago, there were girls like with horror stories, right, of staining their face for weeks with henna products. And
Yeah. Yeah, they would try to be doing this freckle effect and then they'd go to wipe it off and it would be so dark. And then you're stuck with it because it's henna and henna stays. Like it stays for, I think, depending on what part of the body you have it, but it's at least a week.
wow. So also neon eyeliner and tie-dye nails.
It's not so weird to me. I don't know.
That's the more normal of the stuff, right?
I guess. And underwear as outerwear. You want to explain that one, Mom? Because I'm not familiar.
I don't know. It just, when I was looking up things, that's one of the things that showed up.
Perhaps they mean in the sense of like bralettes and things like that. That
Sort of,
kind of
but
lingerie sort of things are seen as appropriate tops to wear out in public, or
yeah, maybe. And a lot of the younger girls' dresses now almost look like what in my day, you would wear
yeah,
as the underwear to the bedroom, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
but
absolutely.
also, when I saw it on the runway, it was very obvious. Like, I'm wearing all black, but I'm wearing my white bra and my white panties, over top of my black stuff. And do people for real do that in the world?
Could
I
just
don't
be on the runway.
know. It might be, but what is it trying to inspire? Like, mission accomplished. All the girls' prom dresses this year look like negligees. Like, is that
I don't know.
right?
I don't know. The next thing we have here, just a few more for the girls, is cutout clothing. So this is clothing that quite literally like it sounds, you just cut out certain parts of it. So you might have the upper chest part cut out, you might have the arms cut out, the back, the side, even the back side. Some people cut out.
So would that be like the onesie that you had when you were a child that you could
Right, the flap opens, right?
to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night? I don't quite understand the backside of your pants missing, but okay, why not?
Yeah.
Also, there's gigantic jeans, so wide leg is in, of course, but we're talking like super double, triple wide leg, and the pants are way too big, and you're holding them up with a belt pulled as tight as possible, and it just looks like you've got a bunch of random fabric basically on because you can't differentiate anything because it's all so big and pulled together.
Yeah, just tripping over your own pant legs, basically.
And the converse of that is tiny things like miniature purses and glasses for accessories.
Yeah, and not just that, but it's something about tiny things that is attractive. I don't know. I know the mini brands thing, it's less so about um women my age, but maybe a little bit of my sister's age, maybe younger. There's that mini brands where it's just cool to collect mini items that are sold in these like little balls, and it's like you get this mini thing of ketchup and a mini
Right.
bag of chips and a mini
That's
whatever.
that's still a thing.
Yeah, kind of. To my understanding, maybe not so much in our age groups, but they're still sold. I still see them around.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us some of the boy trends?
So, to start off, there's statement beards. So this is kind of a continued trend, but it just shifts in what is in and what's not in. So there's everything from the Spartan, where all the hair is concentrated on the chin area, and then it's just short on the sides. Then you just get like the Duck Dynasty statement beards. I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory. You also have fresh flower beards, which I wasn't aware of those, but then once you mentioned it to me months ago, Mom, and then I started to see them online. So that was just funny how it was like all of a sudden it was there. But yeah, it's just basically these beards that are well groomed and there's a bunch of flowers within them, and it becomes a statement piece, quite literally.
Go out for a walk and start picking wildflowers, inserting them into your beard.
I don't know.
Don't get it. Bleach blonde hair for guys is in right now. Turtlenecks, ew, they're back. Little Austin power-ish.
You know what? There's something about a turtleneck that can look nice if done properly, but I feel like in a lot of circumstances, turtlenecks should not be a thing.
I have yet to see a good job on that, so you let me know if you see
Okay.
painter pants as well. I don't even know. Do you know what painter pants are?
Actually, now that you asked me for a second, I was like, no, it might be the long baggy ones that are like cut in such a way. I don't know how to describe it in
They're actually,
words.
your sister has a pair, strangely enough. So yeah, they just like, they're kind of not denim, but they're thick, like jean type material, but
Yeah,
usually colored like white or cream, or I don't
yeah,
know, some other colors. And they're wide in the leg, but down the legs, like there's two big pockets on the back. There's the side slit pockets, and then you've got these random pockets going down the leg. And I guess they're called painter pants because if you were a painter, you'd put your paintbrushes in there. But when I was in this, when I grew up in the 70s, we had these really cool combs that were about 10 to 12 inches long, and they had like a sticker on them that could say like, smile, you're beautiful, or some brightly colored whatever. And it was like a thing. If you had painter pants, you had to have one of those combs to go in your pocket on the side with like the little message sticking
that's
out.
funny.
It is.
I've never heard of that. And then there's the urban hikers. So you're basically dressed like a normal person, but then finishing off the look with a chore coat. So these are from the 1950s and it's like a worker's coat. So imagine huge pockets all over it to store tools and paintbrushes. We're just on the brush painting kind of trends, I guess. Or a field coat, which was designed for American soldiers fighting in the Vietnam War. So that's considered the urban hiker is wearing one of these big coats, I guess.
Okay. Also on the coat department, we've got for men faux fur coats and pimp style hats. I think I have
Cute.
this in the dress up box.
Exactly. Dress up.
Or we also have velvet tuxedo jackets. So that screams. "Wee."
I don't know. To me, that's not so like out of pocket. It's just like, okay, it's a velvet jacket. Again, if it's done right, it can be nice, but a lot of times it's maybe not. And then I'm sure this is mom's favorite, tall socks pulled over your pants. I feel like that's one of your pet peeves, seeing these great big, you know, I call them dad socks, but because I just don't know what else to call them. They're just pulled halfway up your calf and then you just stick your
White,
pants in.
like basketball socks, the white cotton ones with the three stripes on them or whatever. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't see that being done right ever.
No, me neither.
And for anyone, it's mostly monochromatic looks. So sort of like an AI, very one-dimensional, very cut hair, like of course cut haircut, you know what I mean, like angled haircut. And
Everything is very sharp and like
yeah,
very definitive shapes. I know what you mean.
and like grays and blacks and whites and navies, like there's no other color.
Yeah, no, that's very valid. Yeah, I didn't consider that when you say it like that, but it's very, what would you call those? Not neutral tones, but
Monochromatic, like all one color. Yeah,
yeah,
I guess they'd be neutrals, yeah, for sure.
neutrals.
It's meant to look like this whole AI thing that we're headed into now,
I
right?
don't know that AI is the right word. I don't know if that's something that you used as to describe it, but it's almost like this cool but casual kind of look for people. Like I imagine we're going back to turtlenecks now because that's what I'm imagining, like a brown turtleneck with like a I'm picturing a man, a brown turtleneck with like a beige long coat, and then he's got penny loafers, and you know what I mean? It's just that very like I'm sophisticated, but it's also relaxing kind of look. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we're thinking two different types of people. I'm thinking like they're in a spaceship.
Oh, okay. I'm
Almost,
glad I sound weird.
almost like what you'd see on Star Trek, like, that kind of monochromatic look for clothing. And yeah, you're thinking like Old Navy commercial,
Yeah, pretty much.
like real. Okay, but next,
Um, the only other two, or the one that we have left is Crocs. So those are still quite in fashion. They kind of had a dip there for a couple years, but they are very much back. They're very much like hot commodity kind of thing. You see them everywhere, and now they have like the fuzzy lining. They some have the strap around your ankle, some don't. I was actually with a
little
friend
clippies
yeah, well,
things.
I was just gonna say I was with a friend over this past weekend and we were somewhere and they looked down and they were like, "Oh, what are these buttons?" And I was like, "You don't honestly think those are buttons?" And they were like, "Well, what else would they be?" And I'm like, "They go on Crocs." And he was like, "Oh, like why would you put those on Crocs? They're ugly." And I'm like, "No, no. There's
Why would you
something
wear Crocs?
stylish."
They're
Right.
ugly. Actually, Crocs are, of all the trends we've seen, they're known as the greatest rebranding triumph of the 21st century. Like,
Wow, great.
how do they drag that out? I know, but they got the sandal and they've got the garden shoe and and they're all ugly.
And
But they
it's
wear
so funny because my age group, I know some women that go to the clubs with Crocs on. Like it's just
them away.
it's okay. And if you have all those, little things to put through the holes there, I don't know the proper term. They're not buttons, but we all know what we're talking about here. But if you have a bunch of them, it's like seen as like, oh, and where did you get that one? And oh my gosh, I've never seen that one before. It's kind of like when we went to Disney and they had
Yeah,
like the buttons that you could collect on your lanyard.
that
But
was that was the thing in the 70s too, that we collected these little pins or these round. Yeah.
yeah.
Memories. Um, Talking about Crocs, I've got to say, one of a friend that I used to hang out with a lot, and that's all she ever wore anywhere. And so when you said, people wear them to clubs and stuff, I'm horrified by that. But she used to actually like have special Crocs for, oh, she'd say, these are my fancy Crocs, or these are my.
Oh my goodness.
I don't know if she really, mixed it up or she was just trying to confuse me so that it would be okay. But yeah, I can't imagine myself wearing those to the club, that's for sure.
It's just you never know what's going to become trendy, I guess is our main point. There's lots of technological advancements and influential people over the centuries that have resulted in fashion choices becoming a significant aspect of our identity. And they can have a profound impact on our self-perception and the image that we project to others, and consequently the way people interact with us. And they can actually influence a wide range of scenarios. So from the result of a sporting event to how an interviewer perceives our capability to perform well in a job. Like it's quite literally judge a book by its cover.
Yeah. Also, clothes can reflect our mental and emotional state, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes clothing mishaps can be a visible manifestation of what we're going through on the inside. I think actually it happened this morning. My daughter got up and she prepared to go to school, and she had a cute top on and some gym pants, and it wouldn't, not a biggie, whatever, but normally she's a little more dressed up. And I noticed that a couple other times recently she had worn gym pants, and of course as a mom you're like, oh, maybe she's depressed. She's not looking after herself anymore, she's
Right.
wearing gym pants. So I said, I actually asked and said, like, is it a thing right now to be wearing gym pants, or are you just not feeling jeans today or whatever? And yeah, it was nothing, but it's interesting, the mentality just generationally, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so and that being said as well, I feel like there's a lot of circumstances where like you're saying, it can reflect our mental and emotional state. It's also about the resources you have available to you. So some people quite literally just don't have what some do when it comes to fashion. So it's just about necessity over anything else.
Yeah. And it does affect the impression we give off to other people, for sure. When you mentioned earlier about the job interview, right? Like, some corporations take that seriously. If you don't come in dressed up like who they're looking for, even if your resume and your interview goes well, like, it can be a strike against you.
Yeah, and not to go off on a tangent, but the same can be said about tattoos, body piercings, any body modifications. It's just about how people perceive you. Just its face value, quite literally. Um, and fashion can also reflect growth and our changing values, and it just can also be a form of self-expression as well.
Yeah. And we all want to dress in a way that reflects our values and traits, but especially young people, right? They want to have the ability to express themselves through their fashion choices. But ironically, the search for self expression often ends up in a cookie cutter look, or a style that, is something that the wearer isn't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just more about throwing it on, right?
Yeah.
Um,
If you look at, let's say, drive past the high school, like, many of the kids there are all dressed the same, even though they're looking for their personal identities as they grow and mature. I think of stuff that I wore through the years that was trendy, but it just didn't work out. And you're thinking, oh, I can pull this off, even though it's not at all your personality. And maybe if you walked in there with confidence, you could pull it off. But I think we'd be fooling ourselves to think that we don't exude that somehow, that you're a little bit uncomfortable. And I think of a recent incident that you and I had been out somewhere, and I saw a girl wearing a dress, and it was a nice dress, looked great on her. But the whole time that she was standing talking to somebody beside me, she was doing this, right? And I'm thinking, like, wow, make it obvious that you're not comfortable in what you're wearing. And we're not just talking once or twice that she was digging
mm,
herself, like, it was almost constant. And I kind of felt bad for her, because I thought, like, you've got to put in the whole time that you're at this place wearing what you're wearing, but obviously you're uncomfortable with that, right? So I think we've all fallen into the trap of wearing something that we thought was going to work out, but then once you get where you're going, you're like, bad decision.
I see it partly different as well. It could be that we think it's going to be good and then it was a bad decision, but also it could just be you feel the pressures to put on something that isn't necessarily your first choice, but because it's maybe a work event or you're going to your spouse's whatever and you want to make a good impression. So you put on a dress that wouldn't typically be your style, but you want to put off a good positive influential vibe or whatever. So that could very well be the case that you're not going to be comfortable, but it's you're trying to put yourself out there a little bit more so that you put off But that's a whole other topic in itself about putting on this show of someone that we're not. But anyway, I digress.
Right. Right. So I guess the whole point here is, although you might be tempted to follow the latest fashions, nothing compares to fit, functionality, and comfort. And you know what you feel good in. Usually it's not something that your mind is constantly occupied, like what we were just talking about. And whether others like it or not, it really doesn't matter if it fits your own personal style and taste.
Right. So thank you so much for tuning in again today. And the main message of today, I guess, is you do you. I know we're so influenced by things around us, and sometimes it's easier said than done. And again, like I said, some people don't have a choice in what they want to portray in their, we're talking about fashion trends. Some people just don't have that ability in the first place. But for those that do, it's so easy to fall into the trends and things that we're not comfortable in. So just do you. Do what makes you happy. So we will see you next Monday for our next episode.
See you next time.
If you or someone you know has a unique story to tell, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at theimperfectpodcast@outlook.com.
For more information and how to connect with us on social media, you can visit us at our website, theimperfectpodcast.ca.
And from whichever platform you are listening to this episode, be sure to like, share, and leave us a review. We would really appreciate your feedback. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode.
We look forward to hearing your feedback and seeing you all find that extra joy and embrace your own imperfect.
See you next week.